The Madman! Paladin, I'm afraid, is going to share much the same fate as Mage in my review here. Let's begin with Auto Defense Matrix, 1 star. Better than Noble Sacrifice in that until you play your minion, it won't activate, so your minion will be protected by enemy minions. You can develop it early, but I just did not see this as impactful enough to warrant a deck slot in your deck. Odd Paladin doesn't care about protecting its guys. There's no real mid-rangey Paladin at the moment, and maybe Mech is the way to do mid-range Paladins, but I don't see that working. Which leads me to Mech Paladin in general with Glowtron. Now Glowtron I'm actually going to rate 4 stars. Glowtron is only 4 stars here because I think that it's going to make its way into Odd Paladin. It's going to replace the Dire Mole that is sometimes in Odd Paladin, but not always in Odd Paladin. So it's going to be a sometimes card in Odd Paladin. This is better than Dire Mole only because you can magnetize Glowtron to itself. So it's barely better than Dire Mole. So let's talk about Mech Paladin. There are 2 different ways that Mech Paladin can be played. First is in an aggressive deck like Odd Paladin. And I looked at all the mechs you can put into Odd Paladin, and they are not very good. It turns out that you can put War Gear, the best magnetic card out there, into Mech Paladin for Odd, but there's just not very many mechs to magnetize it onto. There's Glowtron, there's Mekaroo. That's about it for mechs that are actually good. Other mechs you wouldn't want to play because their stats aren't good, and Odd Paladin is a deck that cares about the stat value of their minions. They don't want to run Harvest Golem, in other words. What else could you do for mechs? Well, you could just play a mid-range Paladin deck with mechs, and I tried building such a deck. It looked like an arena deck, where you played cards which were like 1 mana 1/3s, 2 mana 1/5s, 3 mana 3/4s. It's like, that is not going to put on enough pressure to tackle the combo decks or the control decks. It's just a bad zoo deck. And then I looked into this idea of Meat Wagon with Mechano Egg. And we'll cover that in greater detail with Mechano Egg, but in short, that creates a mid-range Paladin deck, which is very slow, and that is not going to beat control decks, and it's not going to beat combo decks, so it seems poor. It's not even that good against aggro decks. So in short, I don't think Mech Paladin will work. Crystal Smith Kangor, 1 star. Crystal Smith Kangor helps to push a mech deck. It helps to push Corpse Taker because it has Divine Shield and Lifesteal. It helps to push Christology because it has 1 attack. But the problem with this is that Control Paladin and Mid-Range Paladin, both of those decks are just bad. They didn't see any play in the current meta, and there aren't enough compelling arguments that it'll be good in the next meta either. Against a few of these combo decks, being at 30 health doesn't matter. There are better ways to deal with aggro decks than healing. And against mid-range or control decks, they generally don't care about your health points as well. Currently, we're at a state in the meta where health is not very important. Christology, 1 star, for much the same reason. It's a very good card, and I think of the 1-star cards, Christology has a decent chance of being played if I'm wrong about mid-range and Control Paladin being viable, because Christology is extremely good. It draws you 2 cards that you actually want to draw in your deck. It can draw you the Kangor, it can draw you Stonehill Defender, it can draw you Tar Creeper. Also gets you your Meat Wagon, by the way, for if you want to build that Mechano Egg Meat Wagon deck. The main problem is mid-range Paladin and Control Paladin, as I've established, are very poor choices of deck archetypes to play. Christology is not strong enough, in other words, to push the mid-range and the Control Paladin into viability. People who are watching this review usually either praise or criticize this idea that I'm saying this card is extremely good, 1 star, but I feel like it's accurate to say this card is powerful, it won't see play 1 star. In the future, when Control Paladin or mid-range Paladin are good, I think Christology will be played, and it'll be great. But currently, it'll probably see no play whatsoever, because those decks have no chance in the metagame that I envisioned. Annoy Module, 1 star. Decent magnetic card, but this kind of sets the tone for mech cards. They're defensive, and defensive cards do not allow you to kill, control, or combo decks. The only thing defensive cards are good for are protecting you against aggro, And making your deck only good against aggro doesn't seem successful in the upcoming meta, where there's a bunch of good control decks and there's a bunch of good combo decks. You need to be able to defeat all of them. And you can make the argument that if there's a bunch of combo decks, that aggro will rise to kill off those combo decks. The other problem though is that control decks can kill your aggro decks, and control decks just don't worry about these low attack minions. But Annoya module on Mechano Egg seems good. Prismatic Lens, fascinating card. 1 star. With proper high rolling, Prismatic Lens does enable you to do some really disgusting things. You want to do one of two things. You want to build a very low cost deck with a bunch of spells, like secrets, and then you put the Prismatic Lens, you draw a secret, you draw a high cost minion, swap them, and then you play your high cost minion for the cheap on the following turn. But the main problem is, in nearly every deck you do have to play a variety of minion costs. And really the highest cost cards you want are not very many. There's just Tyrion, there's the Lich King, and then there's Tarim for your high end. And the chances that you instead draw something relatively low cost as well, like the utility cards of Stonehill Defender, etc., they're decent enough. I do think this card is quite a lot better than 4 mana draw 2, because it draws you a great card and it draws you a bad card, and a great card and a bad card are better than 2 good cards. Especially when the great card you draw could be like really disgustingly good. But it's just too high rule-ish. I don't think you can consistently build it. The other way you can build it is you play a few high cost spells and a lot of low cost minions, but then you have the chance of activating your lens, and then you're not playing Consecration or Hammer of Wrath. It's just Next up we have the big card, which is going to push Mechano Paladin to work, if it does work. Mechano Egg, 1 star. In the case that this does work, Meat Wagon into Mechano Egg, into buffing the Mechano Egg by a lot, and then like putting Taunt on the Mechano Egg with cards like Annoya module, and then bringing the Mechano Egg and the Robosaur back with Kangor's Endless Army. That is incredible amounts of value. But even I, the mayor of Value Town, must nod my head to those combo decks out there, which don't care about your value. If you're too slow to kill them, they get the value by dealing 30 damage to you. The amount of value you gain doesn't matter if you're just going to die if you give the opponent too long an amount of time. It's a dark day in Value Town indeed. And it blows my mind how much value you would get if you Cabal Shadow Priested a Mechano Egg with a Annoya module on it. Drink Ray, 1 star. I think I've really hammered home the concept of mid-range Paladin and Control Paladin not being great, but I think this card isn't even that good for Control Paladin and mid-range Paladin. Mid-range Paladin isn't great, Control Paladin isn't great, Shrink Ray isn't good. Does the attack really matter if you are probably trying to clear them off with Equality? Is the 3rd copy of Equality that good that you run the Shrink Ray? And yes, the Shrink Ray is good temporary delay as well. Like, you can just Shrink Ray them, and then on a later turn, you then kill everything, but Next, Glowstone Technician, 1 star. This is a card that gets you so much value if you build your deck to draw a bunch of cards and then play Glowstone Technician. But I think we've established at this point that a value deck I don't really think is good. So slow. If you do buff 3 cards with it, you could think of it as like a 9-10 worth of stats, but you have to play the 6 drop, and then you have to play all the buffed cards. It's so slow, and a value deck is not going to work in this meta. And we have Kangor's Endless Army. That big legendary spell from Paladin, 1 star. Very hyped card, 7 mana, resurrect 3 friendly mechs, and they get the magnetic cards. So if you resurrect your Mechano Egg with a Annoya module equipped on it, that's already incredible value. 2/7 Taunt Divine Shield back, which gets you a Robosaur. You're getting an 8 mana, 8/8 Robosaur. You're getting some other card, which probably got magnetized really well. But here's the problem. You need to kill these combo decks by like turn 13-ish, and also the other problem is Kangor's Endless Army is a legendary spell. It's a 1-of in your deck. What are the chances that you're going to draw your trump card? Will you have this all set up by that time? I think it won't be. I think it's too slow. Value Paladin, Control Paladin, Mid-range Paladin, not going to work in the upcoming meta. So, when we look at this big board of Paladin cards, it seems like most Mech Paladin cards were focused on defense and anti-aggro. And I think they serve their purpose pretty well for that. Indeed, those aggro decks are going to have a fit if they can't get past it, if they don't have silence. But the problem is, just being good enough against aggro decks does not make for a good deck. Very tough to build an aggro mech deck, so most of the odd mechs aren't going to work in odd paladin. Very tough to build anything that's not a mid-range or a control paladin based off these cards, and mid-range and control paladin just seem to be really weak picks in the upcoming meta. So for that reason, the only card that has a chance of seeing play, I think, is going to be Glowtron, sometimes as a card that will barely be better than Dire Maul in odd paladin. Sad days ahead for the paladin. But hey, at least it'll still have odd paladin, which is going to be a tier 1 deck still, I think.